can't believe this. I can't tell you anything. Every time I tell you something, everybody else knows about it. No, I'm mad.
What is up, everybody? It's Brandon coming at you live from Smith's Grove, and today I'm covering Halloween H20 20 years later, released in 1998 and directed by Steve Miner. So after Halloween 6, it looked as though Halloween 7 would see a potential direct-to-video release, with the original idea for the 7th installment beginning as a second-half treatment written by Halloween 6 writer Daniel Farrens. The story would have opened after the events of Halloween 6, with Tommy discovering the mass conspiracy that the town of Haddonfield was involved in the plot to control Michael Myers. Farrens compared the story to that of various films of the past, like The Wicker Man and The Hitcher. He even drew inspiration from Dennis Etchison's rejected screenplay of Halloween 4. He later decided, however, not to continue with the series, saying he couldn't bear to watch another one of his scripts turned into a debacle like it was in the last film. Another idea pitched afterwards was written by Robert Zappia that involved Michael Myers stalking an all-women's boarding school. The plot would have revealed a copycat killer, with comparisons being similar to Silence of the Lambs. Zappia eventually would end up being told to scrap the script because Jamie Lee Curtis agreed to come on board, and now they had plans for a big theatrical release. It's unclear how this actually came about, as Malek Akkad has told the story of the producers approaching Curtis to come back, and on the other side, Jamie Lee Curtis has said that her and John Carpenter were the ones wanting to get together for a new film, with Jamie Lee being more or less the brainchild of it all. I feel like I need to side with Jamie on this one. Thankfully, Jamie Lee Curtis had an idea, and alongside John Carpenter and Deborah Hill, was set to finish her and Michael's story once and for all. After talking with both about making a 20th anniversary movie, Jamie pitched the idea of Laurie facing her fears and trauma while coming face to face with the boogeyman once again. Her idea was that Laurie didn't have much of a life, constantly living in fear, and that since she felt dead anyway, it was time to face her tormentor or die trying. To help realize this, screenwriter Kevin Williamson was hired to revise the script. Originally titled Halloween 7: The Revenge of Laurie Strode, the story was situated as a sequel to the previous 6 films, and not just the first 2, keeping the full timeline continuity. He created the story of Laurie faking her own death and taking a new identity in order to retcon the character's death in part 4. In the original script, there were scenes in which flashbacks of 4 through 6 took place, as well as a student of Laurie's, now going by Carrie, doing a report on Myers, mentioning the events of 4 through 6 and the death of her daughter Jamie. In this treatment, this leads Laurie to going to the restroom to throw up after learning of her daughter's death. Unfortunately, it doesn't turn out that way, although some things do remain in the final script. Some of Robert Zappia's ideas remain as well in an altered form, such as the private school setting, now co-ed instead of an all-girls school. While Zappia ended up with the sole credit on the screenplay, a good deal of it was revised and written by Kevin Williamson, who was also involved in many other areas of production. To me, and probably most people, this is a Kevin Williamson movie more than it is a Robert Zappia film. John Carpenter was originally attached to the film as director, but when he approached the Akkads and Weinsteins about wanting a 3-picture deal and $10 million, they balked at the idea and Carpenter left the project. Carpenter rationalized this starter fee as compensation he never received from the original Halloween's box office earnings. It's sad too, could have been something real special. And plus, they probably shouldn't have been so shitty to him considering what happens again to the franchise. Anyway, Deborah Hill eventually detached herself from the project as well, leaving Jamie Lee Curtis as the last OG remaining. They about fucked up and ran her off too after a few rewrites left the ending vague, and thus pissing her off. Her sole purpose for doing the movie was with the intention of finally killing off Michael and Laurie overcoming her demons. Due to a weird clause in the contract, however, Mustafa Akkad had amended that Michael cannot be killed in the franchise, leaving JLC in a real tight spot. It was then that Kevin Williamson provided a solution to the ending and came up with the paramedic storyline. Jamie eventually agreed to stay on 2 conditions. One was that no scenes pertaining to Michael's survival be included in the film so that her and the audience would believe he's actually dead, and 2, she would have to return for the sequel, institutionalized after learning about the paramedic, knowing her or her character wouldn't be able to deal with the murdering of an innocent man, and it would be there that she would end Laurie's character in the franchise for good, or so we all thought. With John Carpenter out for sure, Steve Miner would assume the director's role. Miner, having worked with Jamie Lee Curtis before on the film Forever Young, would often be the bridge between Curtis and the studio during rewrites and any other issues. Steve Miner is to this day the only director to have crossed over and directed more than one of horror's big 3, with him previously directing Friday the 13th Part 2 and 3. Casting for the movie hits the late 90s nostalgia button with the likes of Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Jody Lynn O'Keefe, LL Cool J, Michelle Williams, and starring in his first big movie role, the 90s cowlick himself, Josh Hartnett. Rounding out the cast, we have Adam Arkin as Will Brennan, and one of my favorite characters in this movie, I might add, Halloween alumni Nancy Stevens as Marion Chambers Whittington, Adam Handberg Songbird from Jumanji fame as Charlie Devereaux, and last but not least, OG Scream Queen and real-life mother to Jamie Lee Curtis, Janet Leigh, who we all know and love from Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho and who plays Norma Watson in this movie in a brief cameo role. Fun fact here, this was Janet Leigh's first role in 18 years, with the last movie she played in being John Carpenter's The Fog, which coincidentally starred Jamie Lee Curtis. The role of Michael Myers goes to stuntman Chris Durand in this one, who also played Ghostface in Scream 2 the prior year. Despite not knowing much about the series or the character, Durand's performance and mannerisms as the Shape were actually pretty solid in this one, and he's one of the better Michael Myers in the franchise because of this. Just my opinion. Unfortunately, that performance gets a little overshadowed at times due to the ever so often changing mask in the film. There were 3 masks in total used during production, with the first one, now dubbed the K&B mask, used during most of the filming. After the studio's displeasure with the mask looking too alien-like, K&B made a second mask used from the Halloween 6 mold. This mask would be rejected and changed again, although it is featured in the final film during the opening scenes. The third and final mask was used during reshoots for close-up scenes and wherever they could change it. This mask, though, has also seen criticism by fans for the tight fit and bigger eye cuts, as well as the messier hair. I'm on the fence on this one. I certainly see and understand some of the gripes of the final mask. I don't want to see Michael's eyes either, and at times the hair is pretty crazy, just like it was in Halloween 6. That said, there are some really good shots of the mask while he's in the shadows and in certain lighting conditions, and it looks a little more like the original mask than any of the other ones do. To me it does anyway. By the way, I don't really count the CGI mask as a separate mask because they just used the Halloween 6 mask with CGI elements on top to try and make it look more like the final mask. And yes, it's god-awful, I won't defend that one. Apparently they were out of time and money to do proper reshoots, so that was done on the cheap, and it shows. Halloween H20 began filming in February of '98 and ended that April. Filming took place in and around Los Angeles, with most of the indoor scenes being shot on the Universal Studios backlot. The town of Summer Glen, however, was filmed in La Puente, California. Fun fact about one filming location though, the site used for Hillcrest Academy was at the Canfield Marino Estate in LA, which would also be used in the finale of Scream 3 2 years later. After several months of post-production and the Weinsteins making Weinstein-like changes up until the last minute, which also included the score of the film, Halloween H20 was finally released on August 5th, 1998. With a budget of $17 million, opening weekend saw almost a complete return, drawing a little over $16 million at the box office. H20 finished at $55 million domestically and $75 million worldwide, making another success for the Halloween franchise. The main credit I can help give Dimension Films here is the ability to help push this franchise back to the top, even if it was only for a short time. Halloween H20, despite its silly name that was an obvious marketing ploy and very much a product of its time, was and is still a pretty good movie. Even with its goofy quirks, Scream-like dialogue, and lack of Loomis, it's still one of my favorites in the series. So let's find out why I feel this way and take a look inside the Sanitarium at Halloween H20. The movie opens up with the Dimension Film logo and Mr. Sandman by the Cordettes playing, drawing straight from Halloween 2. Right away, they're already telling you that 4 through 6 means absolute dick. In the town of Langdon, Illinois, 2 days before Halloween, we've seen an old familiar face in Nurse Marion Chambers, now Whittington, arriving home from work. Looks like she's still nursing it up, and not only that, she's still smoking like a chimney too. She notices some broken glass from her porch light and that her door was already open, so she runs over to the next door neighbor's house to get help, and finds Jimmy, who's played by Joseph Gordon-Levitt, and his friend Tony. Being cheeky with that hockey mask there, aren't we? Inside, Jimmy calls the police while Tony gives Marion shit about secondhand smoke.
Hasn't anyone told you? Secondhand smoke kills.
Yeah, but they're all dead.
Jimmy decides not to wait for the police and heads over to check out Marion's house for himself. He finds a ransacked office and even scares himself to the point that he fucks Marion's kitchen up. He does what those naughty youths do and steals some beer out of Marion's fridge before heading out. He tells Tony and Marion that he didn't see much except the messed up office and blames the kitchen on the perp as well. I know some aren't a fan of the dialogue and the humor in this movie, but personally, I think it works out well most of the time. At least it's not clown noises. Marion goes inside to check out her office and she finds a picture of Loomis laying out as well as an empty file of Laurie Strode. She hears some noises but misses the boogeyman, however, as he plays a little cat and mouse with her. She notices a shadow move outside the back door, which would be enough to send anyone running the opposite direction, and she does just that. She runs back over to Jimmy's again, but Michael's already made quick work of Jimmy, stabbing him in the face with his own ice skate. Really good visual here for a discover kill. Is it just me, or is that shit creepier with him still rocking in the chair? She makes her way to the back door to find Tony propped up with a knife in his back. His body falls on hers and pins her to the floor as the boogeyman steps into frame. Look at that Halloween 6 mask. That's nice. You know, the way it looks in this scene and in the shadows, it's pretty badass. The hair doesn't look quite as crazy or as long as it was in 6, and honestly, they probably could have just kept this one. The cops arrive fashionably late, like always, as Marion tries her best to fight Mikey off. She manages to break the window, but unfortunately it was too late as the cops were already inside of her house. Michael gives her a gentle neck slash and sends her on her way to horror movie character heaven before stealing her car yet again. The following morning, the detective tells us all the exposition, and we discover Loomis has been living with Marion until his death, and that Michael's body was never found after the hospital fire, further driving that stake into the heart of the Thorn trilogy. We then get a title card in the opening credits while a new orchestra version of the Halloween theme plays. We see close-ups of Dr. Loomis's newspaper clippings as voice actor Tom Kane recites some old classics.
The blackest eyes. The devil's eyes.
Does a decent job here, I guess. We then jump all the way over to Summer Glen, California at Hillcrest Academy High School, where it's finally Halloween. Lori, now going by the name Carrie Tate, is showing us she still has that famous scream of hers as she wakes up from a bad dream. Turns out Mr. Sandman's got connections with the boogeyman because all he keeps sending her is those Michael Myers dreams. Her bed-headed son John comes in to comfort her, even giving her some pills to help, and we see early on the toll her trauma is already starting to take on him. In the kitchen, we get some dialogue showing John's desire for freedom and Carrie being that overprotective and paranoid mother. The school is taking a camping trip to Yosemite, and he feels like he's earned it for some reason, even though he's failed to do some of the simplest things in life, like comb his hair or tuck in that damn shirt. Carrie says until he can learn to look less like a skater from a mid-90s rom-com, he's not going. Okay, it was me that said that, but still, he's not going, and that's that. John meets up with his friends Charlie and Sarah, where Charlie says he's enabling her behavior, giving him shit about living with his mother for another 20 years. Meanwhile, Carrie is watching out the window ahead while visions of the boogeyman danced in her head. She does that famous eye close trick and he disappears.
60% of the time, it works every time.
We get introduced to John's main squeeze Molly, played by Michelle Williams, who was just told by Steve Miner that in order for a horror movie script to work, she can't go to Yosemite either. So with the final couple out, Charlie devises a plan to stay behind and have a... what did you call it, Charlie?
Could have a roaming orgy.
I love the way this man thinks.
Oh, that's right. So this is one of those rare times in the movie where the dialogue and the humor doesn't exactly work very well, but luckily there's only a few of those instances, and it mostly revolves around Charlie. Up the road in a mysterious land called Northern California, we get a scene that made everyone even more terrified of using rest stop bathrooms. While the little girl is humming away doing her business, we get nice POV shots from the mother as a hand grabs her purse from under the stall, and then again of Michael looking back at her through the mirror as she stares through the crack of the stall door. Back at Hillcrest, Carrie holds an assembly about the camping trip, telling the students not to do all the things students do on any given weekend. Charlie shows up late, telling the crew he purposely didn't hand his book report in so he could stay behind, and Sarah says she faked a fever so she can stay in bed. That's cool, guys, so what's the plan now?
Romantic dinner, candlelight, soft music, animal sex.
What the f***? You see what I mean? Charlie.
Stop it. Get some help.
After the assembly, we get our first glimpse at Secretary Norma Watson, as well as some character development between Carrie and guidance counselor Will Brennan, as he sucks face with Carrie in her office. She's still feeling a little Halloweened out though, so she puts a stop to him guiding his Halloweenie into her council. They agree to meet up later for lunch instead, as she protectively admires a picture on her desk of John that she must have took after he woke up from a nap. In all seriousness though, Josh Hartnett was apparently a little rebel on set and didn't agree with the production designer's look for the character. So every chance he'd get, he'd mess his hair up or wear a beanie in between takes in defiance. Speaking of rebelling, John and Charlie decide they want to sneak off campus for lunch but have to convince Ronnie the security guard to step away from his aspirations of writing romance novels to let him out.
Room with her long, slender legs. They climbed high up her skirt, leading to two tumultuous, round, melon breasts.
Round melon, what?
I guess Ronnie's old lady ain't having it. Listen, ladies out there, you gotta support your men. Even if it isn't realistic, it never hurts to chase a dream. Anyway, John manages to convince Ronnie to look the other way and he lets him go.
All right. Comb your hair.
I've already been trying to tell him, Ronnie, and he won't listen. In town, Carrie arrives for her lunch date with Will. She tries to muster up the courage to tell him about her backstory as she dives into her glass of wine. Apparently, Jamie Lee Curtis wanted the character of Carrie Tate to be even more of a traumatized alcoholic, but the studio had to soften that approach a bit. Despite this, I still think they did her character better in this film than the Halloween trilogy did. Meanwhile, Charlie steals some wine for the party as they run into Carrie outside on the sidewalk. Carrie then gives John the what for in front of everyone within earshot, telling John to be responsible. He tells her he's tired of all the Michael Myers shit and that he's not responsible for her. He says Michael Myers is dead and it's time to move on. Sorry, John, you're wrong about this one because Michael Myers just watched that whole shit show from that shit show of a car he's driving. And by the way, they definitely picked the creepiest car they can find for this one. Michael follows them out of town and back to Hillcrest before driving off for a spell. Ronnie lets them back in, but not before getting belittled by Carrie for letting the boys out. You know why he did it, Carrie? Pfft, tell this bitch why you did it, Cool J. A little later, John shows Molly the party spot that they've created, and I'm assuming it's for when the roaming orgy and the animal sex is done? Anyway, afterwards in class, Molly does the classic Laurie Strode thing where she looks out the window to see a boogeyman, but unfortunately, he's wearing the first K&B mask. Should have reshot this one, boys. That's a little too close and lit to not notice that big white alien mask behind the door. And again, in Laurie Strode fashion, Molly gets called on by the OG herself to answer a question like a real SMRT smart girl before turning back to see the boogeyman is Gone gone. Laurie calls John over after class to give him a permission slip to Yosemite, figuring she was finally doing him a favor in letting the reins go after that awkward argument in town. As the kids all bus up and leave for Yosemite, Norma accidentally scares Carrie outside. We get a really meta scene here with Norma acting maternal towards Carrie and even delivering one of Sheriff Brackett's old lines.
Hey, it's Halloween. I guess everyone's entitled to one good scare.
She drives off in her 57 Ford Custom with the Shades of Psycho score playing. Now that's a cameo. That night, Ronnie spots a creepy car outside of the gate with no driver in sight. As he checks inside the car, the Boogie Master sneaks behind him entering the school grounds. Damn it, Ronnie, I haven't seen anyone fuck up this badly since Earl and the boys shot Ted Hollister.
You dumb son of a bitch. You said you saw Myers.
Michael wastes zero time and starts heading towards Carrie as she heads back home for the night. She does that eye close thing and reopens and holy shit! Carrie, he's still there. Carrie, close him again, quick. Oh, holy fuck, he's still there. Carrie. Carrie. Carrie!
Lord, I'm having a heart attack! Damn, this is some scary shit!
Well, now that we've all got a clean pair of shorts on, Will tells Carrie that he has to check on the kids that stayed behind but would be over later to keep her company. As he walks off, though, he notices a figure heading into the bushes, confirming Michael was there the whole time. The next scene we get is of Molly and Sarah watching Scream 2 and getting ready for the after-hours shenanigans. It's funny they're watching Scream 2 in this movie because in the first Scream, Randy and the gang were watching the first Halloween that still exists in this timeline and where these girls' headmistress would have been the final girl in that movie. Yeah, so that doesn't make a whole lot of sense here, so they clearly weren't thinking about anything more than just promoting another one of their IPs in this movie. Will shows up to check on the girls and we get this nice piece of late 90s dialogue.
I'm having my nipples pierced. Oh. But you two have a good time.
It might be stupid dialogue suited for the time, but its humor really works here, and it shows another layer to the Will Brennan character that I've already stated is one of my favorite characters in this movie. The kids sneak into their custom orgy lair to start the party while Carrie and Will get settled in on the couch. During the makeout session, Carrie finally tells Will who she really is. It's a little awkward at first because I think Will thinks it's some sort of role play, but after Carrie, who I will now refer to as just Laurie, makes him listen, she tells him the story of the man that killed his sister and escaped years later and came after her and her friends. He recognized the story in Michael Myers, but it was only when Laurie mentions that the girl faked her death and was now the headmistress of a posh school in Northern California that it really sunk in.
Now, do you want a drink?
Yeah.
When Will asks how old she was when it all happened, she answers 17 as she notices John's birthday card from his deadbeat dad on the mantle. This freaks Laurie out, but even more so after she discovers the phones are down and John's camping gear is still here. Ronnie then shows up and notifies her that there's also a strange car parked out front. She tells Ronnie to try and get the phones back up while she goes and finds the kids. Meanwhile, Charlie and Sarah have separated from the party for the moment when Charlie decides they need a corkscrew for the wine. Hey, have you guys seen the corkscrew?
That fancy corkscrew for the wine bottle?
He finds that fancy corkscrew, and while they really try to tease the old hand in the garbage disposal spot, he pulls it loose before turning into the CG masked Michael. Yikes, that shit is from nightmares. Mr. Sandman, bring me better decision making. Sarah finds Charlie in the elevator with his throat cut as Michael Myers shows up rocking that alien mask again. Oh, that's much better. New masked Michael slices Sarah in the leg as she's forced to escape in the elevator with Charlie's body still inside. Before she can get off on the next floor though, Michael cuts the pulley rope and it comes crashing down on her leg, crushing it severely. The elevator crash was loud enough for Molly and John to hear over that Creed music playing in the background, officially killing their vibe. They decide to check on Sarah and Charlie, but they won't make it in time as Charlie is with Jesus now and Sarah's about to be. Michael catches up with Sarah in her gimp leg upstairs and after holding her head down with his foot, stabs her repeatedly in the back. I'm not gonna lie, this one kinda messed me up when I was a young whippersnapper. It's a simple kill, but the visual of him pressing her head down with his foot and methodically stabbing her multiple times, it stuck with me. Well, just like that, we hit a final circuit as Molly and John find Sarah strung up Casey Becker style in a cool visual, but not as gory as in Scream. They turn to find Michael staring at them, giving him that signature head tilt, and they take off outside. Michael catches up and John tries to fight him off, getting a stab in the leg for his efforts. Before Michael can kill John, Molly grabs a big rock and nails Michael with it so her and John can get away. Michael reverts back to his alien mask form temporarily as he catches up to them at the gate outside of one of the school buildings. His mask keeps alternating forms while he slashes at them, and I can't help but ask myself what they must have been thinking in that editing room. Well, hell, they probably won't notice. Yeah, they won't notice. Well, guys, let me tell you, I love this movie, but I do notice. I've never noticed something so much in my entire life than I notice right now. And once you've noticed, you can't unnotice it. Anyway, Michael grabs the keys and tries each one until he's able to open the gate, and when he does, comes face to face with Laurie once again in an iconic shot. Finally, 20 years in the making, and oh shit, he left. They head inside and Laurie does another callback as she has the kids lock themselves into a closet. Will and Laurie wait Michael out in the hallway, and when Will thinks he spots Michael around the corner, he takes Laurie's gun and shoots that shadowy figure. Clearly, the figure looked like Myers at first, but it turned out to be poor Ronnie instead. As they check on Ronnie, Michael comes through the door behind Will and gives us a throwback to Halloween 2 where Michael killed Nurse Jill. He lifts Will up as he convulses in pain and blood drapes from his mouth. I love this kill here. Michael just kind of holds him there as he stares back at Laurie with a "see, look what I've done" kind of look. Laurie takes off and manages to trick Michael into thinking she hid in a closet and takes him down with a fire extinguisher. She grabs the kids and makes it outside to her car with Michael in pursuit and with his mask constantly changing in between cuts again. They make it to the gate and Laurie tells the kids to take the car down the road to call the police, and they reluctantly agree. As they drive off, she shuts the gate and destroys the controls, locking herself inside with Michael. She finally has realized it's time to face the boogeyman or die trying, and in that context, we get one of the coolest scenes in the franchise. She heads back inside with an axe and Michael shows everyone how strong he is by doing a reverse pull-up. She turns and gives him a pretty good whack with it and he slices up her arm in the same spot as the first movie. She lures him into a mess hall or cafeteria or whatever and they play cat and mouse for a minute until Michael gets fed up and decides to start flipping tables. She stabs him with the broken end of a flag which causes his mask to revert back to that alien-like form again before running upstairs. She fights him off in another kitchen area for a minute where she even knees him in the Halloweeny. Well, he visibly didn't like it too much, but he sure took that shit better than I would have. She runs out of the kitchen area with a couple of knives and catches him off guard again, stabbing him multiple times until he falls over the balcony onto one of those tables from earlier. She heads down to finish him off with that big knife she still had in her hand, but before she can, she's stopped by Ronnie, who's still alive and who tells her it's all over. Yeah, so it looks like the bullet just grazed his ear, I guess. Outside, paramedics and police can be seen wheeling Michael out as the kids are addressed by a cop, and Ronnie calls his woman not only to tell her he's fine, but now he's writing a romantic thriller instead.
What? Yeah, a thriller!
I love you.
I love you too, baby.
Now she seems all happy about it. Is this what it takes, ladies? Your man almost dying to support their dreams? Anyway, Laurie knows that this shit isn't over yet and does what any rational human would do. So she takes an axe, steals the cop's gun from his holster, and then steals the meat wagon her brother was just put into so she can take him out and finish him off for good. As she's driving down the road, she notices him starting to move inside the body bag, and as he gets up and lunges forward, she slams the brakes, sending him crashing out the windshield. When he gets up, she pulls a trick out of the Rachel Carruthers playbook and runs him down with a van. This time, however, he doesn't fly into the air like a bungee jumper and instead latches onto the front of the van. She drives the van off the embankment, and as it barrel rolls down the hill, it tosses her from the van and pins Michael in between it and a fallen tree. Laurie comes to and grabs the axe as she approaches Michael. She gets his attention, and at first he acts out of character a bit, grabbing his head and looking around like he didn't know what was up. Knowing what we know now, we understand why, and that's not actually Michael. There's one thing that always bugged me about that though. If that was just a normal paramedic, then I feel that dude wouldn't have survived having a van slam down on him and crushing him into a tree. Anyway, we're not supposed to know this yet, and neither is Laurie, so for now we get a touching but weird moment where Michael reaches out for Laurie. A teary-eyed Laurie reciprocates the gesture, only to take one final breath and smile before cutting Michael's head off with the axe. And just like that, Laurie's nightmare is over and she can finally breathe a sigh of relief knowing she doesn't have to live in fear anymore. She can finally start to live again. The movie cuts to black and the credits roll as the classic Carpenter theme plays. And that was Halloween H20, released in 1998 and directed by Steve Miner. And at a runtime of 86 minutes, this brisk walk of a film still clocks in to this day as the shortest Halloween film. And if you're a fan who prefers this timeline not counting Resurrection, this is a perfect ending to a really good franchise. If not, then stick around because I have a lot more to show you. And it's not exactly pretty. To me, this movie still holds up really well. Even with some of the Kevin Williamson dialogue being goofy in places, I still really enjoy it. And I love the Scream franchise too, so it really isn't surprising to hear me say that. And I've said this many times before and I will continue to say it, the character development of Laurie Strode and the ending of this character is still better in this movie than anything we got from David Gordon Green. The acting for the most part was pretty decent in this movie and everyone played their parts really well. The only exception I could really say is Adam Hanberg. Charlie just wasn't that interesting of a character and neither was his death. Everyone else was fine though. Chris Duran played the Shape really well and the visuals and lighting were above par most of the time. The score, however, I'm kind of on the fence with. I think there are many scenes in the film where the score works really well and adds to the tension or the moment, but there's other parts where it doesn't do that so much. I did notice that they use the same music cues from the Scream franchise. If they weren't the same, they were damn close to it. And I thought that was okay at times, but it probably would have been better without it. I mean, it isn't Scream after all, it's Halloween. Despite some of the film's negatives, it's still one of the highest rated movies in the franchise. And even though we didn't get to see Kevin Williamson's original plan to include all 7 films in the continuity, it still captured the heart of the story and brought it to a proper conclusion at the time. For that, I give Halloween H20 a 3.7 out of 5. It's still very high on my list after all these years, and you know what? It's funny because these films seem to do so much better when they just get back to the basics. The same thing happened with 4 actually, and then the next one came and shit down its throat. And the comparisons aren't that much different between 4 and 5 than they are between H2O and the next installment, as it takes another weird turn for the franchise again. And though we won't see a man in black kicking a little dog, we will see a black man kicking a little ass. Next time, I'll be covering Halloween Resurrection, and we'll see why this film gets shit on more than the Pigeon Lady from Home Alone 2. And until that fateful day arrives, as always, thank you guys for watching, and stay sane.